Today I'm going to be making some air dry clay fridge magnets, and I'm using this piece of artwork that I just very recently finished as the inspiration for the magnets I'm going to be making today. So we've seen the inspiration for today's project. This is just what I've chosen to make today, but you can choose literally any theme and you can make your own magnets according to the theme that you choose. Last week I did a similar theme using foods, but I did more of a savory theme. So I did pretzels and pizza and fried egg, tomatoes, baguettes, a few other things, but still staying within the food theme. But today we are going solely on what my inspiration was, which was that piece of artwork that I showed you just before, which is what I finished today. And I'm now going to make a set of magnets to match this theme. I'm going to start with the croissant. So I'm just going to take a small little blob, I guess you would call it, a small little piece of clay. Make sure you always keep your lid on your clay as well, or if you're using it from a bag, just make sure that you're always folding the top of the bag over so that it's not exposed to air, because once obviously it's exposed to air, it's going to start drying up and it won't be good for use anymore. So now what I'm going to do for my croissant is I've got my clay and I don't know where my rolling pin is, so I found this, which is a little plant propagation test tube. So anything you can use, if you've got like a can or something that's, flat, a glass or anything that's smooth and flat, you can use that. Anything that serves its purpose is fine. You don't need all the fancy tools. And I'm just going to roll this out like pastry for a croissant. And I think that's pretty good. You want it to be pretty even thickness. I've rolled this out to probably a couple of millimeters thickness. And again, it will depend on the size of your magnets. I only want quite small ones, so I'm rolling it quite thin and I'm using a piece that's probably about maybe 10 centimeters maximum. And for the croissant, I'm just going to cut across our smaller edge here using an X-Acto knife, and I'm going to come down on a triangular angle there, and I'm going to do the same. So you want sort of a thin width here, so from about here I'm going to come out wide again, so you end up with a wider edge to your triangle, wider at the bottom, quite narrow at the top. And then what we will do here is we're simply going to turn it over. Doesn't really matter, that both sides are pretty good. If you've got a side that's smoother, make sure you use that side on the outside, so facing down. So when we roll, that smooth side is going to be what's facing to the right side of the magnet, if that makes sense. We're going to start rolling our clay, so very gently just fold that over and just start rolling it up. Now you can see that we've got this shape. Now all I'm going to do here is I'm going to just grab it from the center using my thumbs and my pointer fingers, and we're just going to slightly bend it very gently, just sort of molding that into place and shaping it around to take on that croissant shape. Now at this point I'm looking at it, I'm thinking that looks a little bit wide still, so what I'm just going to do is gently just take a little bit more off that. I feel like it looks a little bit odd, so I'm just going to take And this could be something that when you cut your clay in the first place, you just go a lot more narrow than I did to begin with. And I'm just going to pull that down again. And now I'm more happy with that shape. So once you're happy with the shape of it, what I like to do is just come in with a small damp paintbrush. This has just got some water on it. And I'm just going to smooth out those cracks. And you can use your finger to smooth that around as well. But you want to just eliminate any cracks and imperfections you can see in the clay. You can see just by working a tiny bit of water onto the clay, that really helps. And you want to do this for the entire piece. Now, where the edges are rolled up, you can see they look a little bit messy there. I'm just going to do the same thing and just smooth out those edges. Can get a little bit fiddly as the clay can get very sticky, particularly this Crayola brand. I find it's quite soft and it doesn't like having too much water added to it. So if you add too much water, it's going to get very, very sticky and very, very fragile in a way that it can become difficult to manage and difficult to work with. So just be mindful of when you're adding your water to add just tiny little bits at a time and don't over drench it. I'm quite happy with how that's looking. I haven't smoothed out the back, but I'm not too worried about the back because the magnet will sit on the back anyway. But what you can do is just let it sit there for 10, 20 minutes or so. And once it's lost its tackiness from that water, you can flip it over and smooth out the back if you wish to. I'm not going to be too fussed as well as the fact that I can come in once the air dry clay is dry and I can lightly sand it with some fine grit sandpaper and get rid of any of those tiny little imperfections. But for now, I'm really happy with how that looks. So I'm just going to pop that to the side. I should have mentioned as well, this piece of clay that we didn't use should go straight back into the airtight container. I left it out and it is okay and it still can be used. But as you can see, it's starting to dry out, and once it starts to dry out, you can't really work with it anymore. So if you don't want to waste your clay, always put your scraps back into the tub so that they can be used at a later time. Okay, next up, I think we are going to do the cinnamon scroll. So again, I'm just going to get a little blob. I think I'm just guesstimating. I think that looks about right. Again, make sure you put your lids on. And I think for the cinnamon scroll, I'm just going to roll this out. Bear in mind, I'm making this up as I go. So I've never actually made these magnets before. in this theme. So let's just hope that what my brain is telling me to do is going to pay off. Rolling it into a thin little sausage. I reckon that's about 1 centimetre thickness there, maybe slightly less than 1 centimetre. And again, I'm just going to wing this, so let's see what happens. I'm going to get the end and just pull it around. Starting to crack there. Now what I want to do is just gently smooth that out with some water. Again, do not add too much. Less is more in the case with working with air dry clay, I find. And we're just going to roll it into a little scroll, and look, I think it's working, looking pretty good. I want to keep the scale of all my magnets pretty similar, so I don't want one to be, extremely larger than the other, which I feel like that's looking a little bit too big there. So I'm just going to bring that back so that it matches the scale. And what I'm going to do is chop that off. I'm going to put my scrap straight back into the tub. And now with this edge, I want to just round it off a little bit. You don't want it to be too severe and sharp on that edge. You want it to look realistic. So I'm just softening that edge a little bit using my fingers and making it look like it's less of a straight edge. It's more rounded. And then where that's going to meet there, I'm just going to get my water again, and I'm just using a little bit to almost glue that down. If you have slip, you can use a little bit of slip. If you don't know what slip is, it's simply just a bit of clay mixed with water to create like a paste, and you can use that a bit like a glue. Now, just like before, I'm coming in with some water. Probably use a little bit too much there, but that's okay because I don't mind those edges, the seams, I guess, sort of looking a little bit more stuck together. And I'm just going to smooth all those little creases out. Using both the paintbrush and my finger to smooth out the cracks. I apologize for the camera going in and out of focus. It's night time here and I'm using a ring light, and I think my phone gets a little bit temperamental when I don't use daylight. Doesn't like the artificial lighting. Okay, so you can see I've almost used the water and the clay together to just get rid of the seam. So we don't want that gap. I want it to look like it's a bit more realistic. All the parts are sticking to each other, each little coil. And I think that looks pretty good. Again, I'm not being too fussy because I can come in with the fine grit sandpaper at the end. And it's really only that front edge that we're worried about when we're making magnets, because the back edge is obviously covered with a magnet and it's facing the back onto the fridge. So I think that looks pretty good for my cinnamon scroll. So we will put that aside. We've got our croissant and our cinnamon scroll. Next up, I think we're going to make the waffle. And again, I haven't made this before, so I'm just going to try and wing it. I'm going to flatten out a little bit of clay, and I'm going to do this in a square shape. So I'm going to roll it out to maybe about 3 mil thickness. So I've got that rolled out. Now with my X-Acto knife, I am just going to create a square. Now again, I want to keep it in scale with what we have. So I'm just going to go probably about that size. And you just make this up as you go. You just make it up to whatever size you want to do, whatever fits in with the scaling of the ones you've previously made. I think that looks pretty good. And now I've got the base of my waffle. What I think I'm going to do here, and I hope this works, this could get a little bit fiddly. I'm going to use the scraps that I have, and I'm going to roll them out into a little sausage. And I'm going to go probably 2 and 2 that way. So to ensure that your added pieces are going to stick to the clay and not, you know, flick off after they dry, you want to really create a surface for them to attach to. So I'm coming in and scoring just with my X-Acto knife. You just want to put some texture into the surface of the clay, and you're going to do this where you think your strips are going to be placed. So that looks pretty good, and then I'm going to do the same with this as well. So you just want to add some texture into your little sausage piece. I like to go in both directions, just scoring it. Just really sort of roughens up that edge. Now you want to come in with a bit of slip here. If you don't have any slip, you can just use a little bit of water and just come along and make these a little bit more sticky on the surface. And what you will do is come in with the edge that you've texturized, and you're going to place that down and really press that in. And then just cut off the parts that you're not using. Do the same on the other side. Press it into that textured edge and cut off the bit you're not using. Now I think we've probably got enough left here for the other side. And I reckon that looks pretty good. So we're going to go do the same thing here. Texturize the surface going across. Now we're obviously overlapping the parts we just attached, so that's fine. You want them eventually to be pretty even. You don't want them to look like they're overlapping, if that makes sense. So again, just add some slip, and we're going to press that textured edge into there. Chop that off. And we need one more, so I'm just going to use this scrap clay again that we have and roll another sausage out and add our very last crossover here. Scoring that edge, and the same here. Press that down. At this point, I feel like my waffle is slightly larger and off scale, so I'm just going to trim it down a little bit. So I'm just going to take a couple of mil off my edges. Always making sure they're in proportion. So that looks okay. A little bit more off this edge, I think. And I feel like that looks a little bit better. But now I have this pretty rough looking surface, so I want to just try and now get that nice and smooth and looking like an actual waffle. So I'm just going to use my fingers to soften the sides and the edges and the corners. Get your edges smoothed as much as you can. We will come in a little bit with the paintbrush on the sides as well. But that looks pretty good. I'm going to now smooth out the top using my paintbrush and water. And you want to try and, you can see that I've got, obviously there's the seams here from where I've overlapped that. What I want to do is just eliminate that seam. So I want it to look like it's all just smooth. So I'm trying to get rid of these two little creases here. I'm just painting until you see that that seam is almost invisible in that corner there. You want to repeat this on the other corners. So that looks pretty good, I think. And now I think I want to add a really thin border around the edge, just to really neaten it up. So again, sausage. And the waffle itself is pretty damp from adding the water previously onto the surface. So I'm just going to add a little bit around those edges, and then what we'll do is just add this clay like a little border around it and push it into the waffle as you go so that it's really getting attached to it. Like that looks pretty good. And then just as we did before with smoothing it out, I'm just going to take our paintbrush and a little bit of water and just then try and smooth out those seams. You can't see that line anymore, so you want to do this the whole way around. I think that's pretty good for the waffle. Remember that you want them to look realistic. You don't want them to be too symmetrical. So we've got our cinnamon scroll, croissant, and waffle. And next, I think we will do a bagel, which is going to be really quite easy. And I think for the bagel, we're going to just roll out our clay, and this time leave it a little bit thicker. And then I think we will just literally roll it round. That looks pretty good. We want to score these edges again, because we're connecting them. And use your slip. Press those edges together like glue. And then you're just going to smooth them over to get rid of that seam. You want to do this the whole way around. And then with the inside as well, just a little bit of water on that seam and just smooth out that inside as well. You can still see that there's a little bit of a seam here, so I'm just going to use my tool to bring the clay over that seam and the other way. We can smooth it again with our finger. And just like with the other items, you want to smooth those outside edges. You can see it's quite cracked along there, so you really want to smooth those out. It's looking pretty good. And then I'm just going to place the bagel down, and I feel like we want to just shape it a little bit more on that outside edge. It's looking more like a tire or something, so I just want to bring the edges down a little bit flatter. We're a little bit too rounded there, so I'm just going to bring it down, pressing it out a little bit. I think that looks a little bit better now. This is where it really pays to have short nails. Beautiful. And there is breakfast item number 4, our bagel. Now I've left my magnets to dry for the last 2 days, and I'm just going to go over them with some 120 grit sandpaper just to smooth out any of those rough edges on the surface. You don't have to do this. You can skip this step if you wish, but I just thought I would try and get it as smooth as I can before painting the magnets. I'm not being too worried about the back side of the magnets. Obviously they aren't going to be showing, so mostly just the top surface. Now they are ready to be painted, so I'm just using some acrylic paint and I'm pouring out the colours that I think I'll be using: orange, yellow, brown, and a little bit of cream that I already had made up. And now you're literally just going to paint them however you wish. I'm starting with a sort of pale, creamy, yellowy colour for the baked goods. But you can just work out what colours you're using for whichever project you're doing. And I like to start off with the most pale sort of colour that I'll be using, and then I like to build it up and create a bit of dimension by adding in some darker shading colours once the base colour has dried. So you can see I'm just going around and painting all of the tops of the magnets and letting that dry. The croissant I've only done half of because I found it a little bit tricky to hold and paint the whole thing. So I'll just wait until that side has dried and then I'll paint the other side. So I'm just doing the top of the waffle, and now I will let that layer of paint dry. and finish off the other side of the croissant here with the light colour. Now I'm doing the backs, so painting the backs of the magnets. And coming in and starting to create a little bit of dimension here by adding some different shades of paint on top of that first coat that I have done. So on the croissant, I'm just adding a little bit more of a golden colour. You can see that it starts to look a little bit more realistic by adding the different shades. So just continue doing that for each different item. My cinnamon scroll here, just adding a little bit more golden colour to it. Getting around the sides. And then the bagel, same thing, just adding a little bit more dimension to the top of it. Using some different shades. So I'm using darker shades and lighter shades. And just play around until you're happy with how they're looking. Just going in with even a little bit more now, slightly darker again, especially into those creases and making it look as realistic as I can. I think that looks pretty good. I'm just going to add a little bit more orange to warm it up a little bit. Make it look very crispy and golden, and do the same with all of your magnets. Now, luckily for this set of magnets, each one of them is a very similar color scheme, so I'm able to just use the same sort of paints. But for example, the set that I made the other day, which was a whole different range of different foods, had completely different colors. So I had to mix up quite a few different colors on the palette. Just going to add a little bit of shading detail into the cinnamon scroll. Some darker brown. This just also adds like a bit of a shadow effect. And again, just gives it a little bit more dimension. A little bit more colour and some cream to make it look like it's been iced. And I think that looks pretty good. Once your paint has dried, I'm going to come in and give it a gloss finish. Now, I purchased this UV nail varnish from Target. I think it was about $6 Australian. And it has been so handy for this sort of project because you can literally just brush it on straight from the bottle. You can, however, use UV resin if you prefer. I just find that this has been really, really easy for these small projects because you just brush it on and continue on. You can see that I am beginning with the bottom sides of the magnets. So I'm just popping a coat of the UV polish to the bottoms of the magnets. The reason I'm doing this is because once these are cured on the bottoms, I can come in and use a little bit of blue tack on the bottom side of it, and it won't chip the paint because it's coated in the resin. And now I'm just using that blue tack to tack it down to my board so that I can really carefully polish the tops of the magnets, and I'm not having to get my hands all sticky and messy by holding it. So I'm going to set them under the lamp once they have been polished. So I'm doing the top of the cinnamon scroll here, and you can see how well that blue tack works, and it's just really convenient not having to hold it and get a bit fiddly under the lamp. And the bagel, just varnishing the top of that now. I've got that stuck down as well with the blue tack, and cure that one. And then the lucky last one is the waffle. Just making sure I'm getting all of the little squares inside as well as the edges, and then curing that. I cured the magnets for about 5 minutes, and then once that polish is cured, we are ready to stick our magnets on the back. I'm using a gel super glue, and I'm just choosing the size of the magnets according to the size of the piece itself. You want to make sure the magnet's going to be hidden behind it. So I'm using some smaller ones for the bagel and the croissant, and some larger ones for the waffle and the cinnamon scroll. So I just place the super glue on the back of the magnet and simply place it on to the widest part of the magnet, and continue this process for each different magnet that you're making. I got these magnets from a variety store. We have one here called I Love This Shop, I think it's called, and I think they're about $2 for a packet, and I just bought 3 different packets with different sizes, and here they are all finished. I let them dry overnight, and I think they look really cute, and they just add a little bit of personality to our very boring fridge. I hope you enjoyed this tutorial, and if you did, please like and subscribe. Can't wait to see you all soon on the next project.